Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. This interactive video conference is brought to you by the Fresno Pacific Office of Continuing Education and the University Advancement Media Production Team, Fresno Pacific University. Empowering leaders, transforming lives.
Welcome to this course on SCI 902. I simply call it plants. During the presentation, I would like to share with you one lesson from the course.
Hi, I'm Brenna Elric, and I would like to share a lesson from Marvin Harm's course, Plants. Let's get started. This lesson is so important, especially here in California. The San Joaquin Valley is the most productive agricultural region in the world, cultivating more than 250 crops. Most of these crops depend on pollination. This brief introduction to pollination will help your students see the relevance of plants and the role that they take in their lives. Let me give you a real simple definition. Pollination is transferring pollen from its site of formation to a receptive site where it can germinate or grow and sprout. Here is an orchard. Sometimes when you pass an orchard, you will see white boxes that have been set out. These boxes contain bees that live and raise their young. The boxes serve two purposes: to produce honey and pollinate nearby crops. Pollination is paramount. It leads to the creation of new seeds that grow into new plants. So let's get down to the nuts and bolts of pollination. How does pollination work? There's a whole lot that goes on before you even get a seed. One of the ways flowers reproduce is by pollination. If you have ever sniffed a flower and then sneezed, it's probably because you got some pollen in your nose. Achoo! It all begins in the flower. The flower is the reproductive part of the plant. Most flowers have four main parts: sepals, petals, all of the pink, stamens, and pistils, right there. The pistils are the female reproductive part, and the stamens, right there, are the male reproductive part. The stamens produce a sticky powder called pollen, hence the term pollination. In order for a new seed to form, the pollen from the stamen of one flower must be carried to the pistil of another. This can happen in two different ways. The first is when pollen from one plant's stamen is carried to the same plant's stigma. Like this sweet pea plant, it is a very good example of a self-pollinator. And the second is when pollen from one plant's stamen is transferred to a different plant's stigma. It is called cross-pollination. Cross-pollination is entirely different from self-pollination. An important thing to remember is that in cross-pollination, there is always two plants involved of the same species. For example, only the pollen from a lily can pollinate another lily. Pollen from a rose or an apple tree would not work. Let's talk a little bit about self-pollination. Self-pollination tends to decrease the genetic diversity in a population of plant or flower and is much less common than cross-pollination. Many species of plants have mechanisms to promote cross-pollination and avoid self-pollination. Like this flower here. The pistil is much higher than the stamen, preventing the pollen to self-pollinate the flower. Why would self-pollination be a problem? The offspring are genetically identical to the parent and not diverse. The plants have less of a chance of adapting or changing circumstances like weather or disease, and the lack of genetic variation in Irish potatoes, like this one behind me, contributed to the severity of the Irish potato famine. The Great Irish Potato Famine lasted from 1845 to 1852. It devastated Ireland's population and economy. The disease was called potato blight. One genetic strain of a potato was farmed, thus all of their potato crop was destroyed when the blight spread. However, cross-pollination produces stronger plants. The plants become genetically diverse, so when one disease spreads, not all of the species is destroyed. It provides more genetic variation in the offspring. It produces offspring with better characteristics, such as high yield, better flowers, seeds, and fruit, more resistant to disease, and a shorter maturing time of growth. Right here in our Central Valley, a grower uses pollination to produce tree fruit. Let's check out this video.
I will eliminate branches in the middle here multiple times a year. It's a painful process I put this tree through. It stresses every time I do it. But if I don't do it, my tree won't grow as efficient. I won't get the structure that I'm wanting to bear the most productive load on. So I have to constantly be eliminating suckers and growing my tree out. There's the biblical example. Also, some of these varieties of pluots are not self-fertile. Talk a little bit about pollination. Next year, this tree will have grown up and fill up this space, and I'll have a whole bunch of these hangers, Lord willing, out here ready to produce fruit. They'll make buds, and then in the spring, they'll produce flowers. Most varieties of plums and lots of varieties of apricots, they have male and female parts in their flower, but their pollen doesn't make the fruit set, all right? I have to take a pollinator from a different variety, not too closely related, and that blooms the same time, and put a bouquet of flowers out through here through my orchards. And we found the most efficient way of doing that is like this. When I grafted, I put another variety every other tree in every single row, and I grow the pollinator up the middle. So if you look down the row, every other tree will have a bouquet of flowers like this. I'll grow this up indefinitely. After it flowers, I'll prune it off and basically make the trunk look naked here, and I'll leave a few little hangers up here so it can grow my pollen in a spot that doesn't affect my fruit production and doesn't decrease light consumption to my lower hangers. A whole bunch of stuff we do with that.
All right. Pollination can occur in several ways. People can transfer pollen from one plant to another, or animals such as bees, butterflies, flies, bats, or hummingbirds pollinate plants accidentally. They are not trying to pollinate the plant. They are usually just trying to get food. The animals rub against the stamen and get pollen stuck to themselves. When they continue to another flower to feed, the pollen rubs off on the new plant's stigma. Flowering plants have special relationships with the animals that pollinate them. It works out for both of them. In exchange for the flower being pollinated, the animal or insect receives food. Flowering plants have colors, smells, shapes, and nectar to attract unwitting pollinators to the reproductive parts. Plants that are pollinated by the wind often have long stamens and pistils, like this flower behind me. Some plants do not need to attract animal pollinators. They can be dully colored, unscented, and with small or no petals, since no insect needs to land on them, like this grapevine plant here. After pollination, then how does a flower make a seed? The grain of pollen grows a thin tube that travels down the pistil until it pierces one of the ovules in the ovary. Fertilization happens. The fertilized ovule eventually grows into a seed, which can become a new plant, like these here. Well, there you have it, the nuts and bolts of pollination. Throughout this course, you will be able to use many different lessons and/or experiments about plants. For example, Experiment 32. Marvin Harms proposed the question, what would it be like to plan a barbecue naming all the foods at the cookout, and from that list, identifying the foods that came from different pollinated plants? If you remove all of the pollinated foods and describe the rather dull meal you'll be having instead. Let's take a look. You have fruit, grapes, apples, pears. All of those are pollinated. You wouldn't be eating those. The chocolate from the cookie. You need milk or the cocoa seed, which also needs to be pollinated. And all of the meats. The cows would not have the proper food without the plants. Therefore, there would be no meat. The bread needs wheat. You wouldn't have bread either. Cheese. Same thing with the milk. Pretty sure that takes away everything in your picnic except the basket. Have fun eating a wicker basket. Now you see how the process of pollination is important for producing plants which produce foods for us to live. This lesson reminded Marvin Harms of a great verse in the Bible.
Let me close with this verse. Moses shared in Genesis chapter 1, verse 11, and God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it according to their various kinds. I've had a wonderful time sharing with you. If you would like more information on this course and additional courses, browse the FPU website. And it's been good to talk to you, and I trust I'll see you either on the webpage or talk to you via email. Have a great day.